The notification pinged on my phone at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that would forever divide my life into before and after. I was sitting in the campus library at Northwestern, surrounded by constitutional law textbooks and half-empty coffee cups, when my American Express card was declined for a simple sandwich purchase. "Try again," I told the cashier, my cheeks burning as students behind me shifted impatiently in line. But the second swipe yielded the same result: declined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Cameron Zhou, though most people call me Cam. At 22, I was supposed to be focusing on my final semester of law school, not worrying about whether I could afford lunch. My parents, Dr. Eleanor Zhou and Dr. Marcus Zhou, had always provided for me, perhaps too well. The credit cards with their names as guarantors had been my safety net since freshman year of college. I fumbled through my wallet, finding my Visa. Declined. My Mastercard. Also declined. Cash only, the cashier asked, clearly wanting to move the line along. I had $7 and change in my wallet. Not enough for the sandwich, definitely not enough for the confidence I'd built my entire identity around. Walking back to my dorm room, I called my mother's office. Dr. Eleanor Zhou was a prominent pediatric surgeon at Chicago Children's Hospital, and getting through to her during the day usually required an emergency. Today, she picked up on the second ring. "Cameron, I was expecting your call." The ice in her voice made my stomach drop. My mother had perfected the art of controlled disappointment. It was colder than anger, more devastating than screaming. "Mom, my cards aren't working. Is there some kind of error with the bank?" "No error, sweetheart. Your father and I made a decision last night." I sank onto my narrow dorm bed, staring at the acceptance letter to Harvard Law School that hung framed on my wall. 3 years of perfect grades, law review, moot court championships, all building toward a future that suddenly felt uncertain. What decision? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We know about the party, Cameron. We know about the arrest. My blood turned to ice water. 2 weeks ago, I'd been at a house party that got busted by Chicago PD. It wasn't even my party, I'd just been there studying with some classmates when things got out of hand. When the police arrived, they found cocaine in the bathroom. Not mine, but in the chaos of arrests, everyone got booked. My parents' lawyer, Harrison Mills, had made it disappear from my record within 48 hours. A few phone calls, some strategic donations to the police benevolent fund, and the whole thing vanished like it never happened. I thought it was over. "Mom, you know that wasn't what I know," she interrupted, "is that your father and I have spent 30 years building our reputation in this city. We have a medical practice that serves half of Chicago's elite families. We sit on hospital boards, charity committees, and we are 2 years away from opening our own private practice." She paused, and I could hear the familiar sound of her heels clicking against marble floors, the sound of my childhood, of her pacing while making difficult decisions. "Your little adventure almost cost us the Henderson contract." The Henderson contract. Even I knew about that one. Jonathan Henderson owned half the commercial real estate in downtown Chicago, and his family foundation was funding my parents' new private pediatric facility. It was their dream project, a state-of-the-art children's hospital that would cement their legacy in Chicago medicine. "Mrs. Henderson called me personally," my mother continued. "Apparently, her grandson was at that party. When the police report mentioned a Zhou family member, she put 2 and 2 together. She wanted to know if we're the kind of people who raise children with drug problems." "I don't have a drug problem. I wasn't even. It doesn't matter what you were or weren't doing, Cameron. What matters is perception. And right now, the perception is that the Zhou family can't control their own child." I stood up, pacing my small room the same way she was. Probably pacing her office 20 miles away. "So you're cutting off my credit cards? How is that supposed to help anything? You're going to learn what real consequences feel like. No more credit cards, no more allowance, no more safety net. You want to act like an adult who makes dangerous decisions? Then you can figure out how to support yourself like an adult." My hands were shaking. "Mom, I have law school expenses, bar exam fees, applications for. You have a trust fund that activates when you turn 25. Until then, you're on your own. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, feeling the walls of my carefully constructed life crumble around me. My parents weren't just wealthy, they were strategically wealthy. Dr. Eleanor Zhou had built her career on precision and calculated risks, while Dr. Marcus Zhou specialized in the kind of high-stakes pediatric surgery that only the most exclusive families could afford. Together, they'd created Zhou Medical Consulting, a boutique firm that advised other doctors on practice management, medical investments, and strategic partnerships. It was their side business, the thing they did when they weren't saving children's lives or attending charity galas, and it was about to become their downfall, because my parents had made one crucial mistake in their punishment strategy. They assumed that cutting me off would leave me helpless, scrambling for minimum wage jobs while I learned my lesson about responsibility. What they didn't know was that I'd been Harrison Mills' research assistant for 2 years. What they didn't know was that I'd written half the due diligence reports for their business acquisitions. What they didn't know was that I had access to their most sensitive business information, not because I'd stolen it, but because they'd given it to me. "You're the only one we trust to understand the technical details," my father had said last year when he asked me to review a complex contract with a medical device company. "You have the legal training in your family." Family. The word tasted bitter now that I opened my laptop and accessed the shared drive where my parents kept their business files. The password was still the same, Eleanor and Marcus 2001, the year they got married. For people who were so concerned about security and reputation, they were surprisingly trusting when it came to family. The Zhou Medical Consulting client list read like a who's who of Chicago's medical elite. But one name at the top made my breath catch: Steinberg Industries, $2.3 million annual contract. Steinberg Industries, the massive medical supply conglomerate that had been my parents' biggest client for 3 years running. They provided everything from surgical instruments to entire hospital IT systems, and Zhou Medical Consulting was their exclusive advisory firm for physician relations in the Midwest. IT was also the contract that funded their lifestyle. The lake forest mansion, the European vacations, the luxury cars, and yes, the credit cards they'd just cut off. I pulled up the contract files, my legal training kicking in as I analyzed the terms. It was a beautiful piece of work, really. My parents had negotiated exclusive advisory rights, automatic renewal clauses, and penalty fees that would make termination incredibly expensive for Steinberg, but every contract has weaknesses. And as I read through the 847 pages of legal text that I'd helped research and draft, I found exactly what I was looking for. Section 23.7, Ethical Standards and Conduct Clauses. The contract specifically stated that Zhou Medical Consulting must maintain the highest standards of professional and personal conduct befitting representatives of Steinberg Industries. Any breach of professional ethics, legal troubles involving controlled substances, or behavior that could reflect negatively on Steinberg's reputation was grounds for immediate termination, without penalty fees. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. My parents had cut my financial lifeline because they were worried about their reputation. They thought they could teach me a lesson about consequences while protecting their precious business relationships, but they'd forgotten something crucial: I wasn't just their daughter. I was also the person who knew where all their professional bodies were buried. My phone buzzed with a text from my father: "Hope you're learning something today. Adversity builds character." Dottie smiled for the first time since my card was declined. Oh, I was learning something, all right. I opened a new document and began typing: confidential notice of contract breach, Zhou Medical Consulting ethical violations. If my parents wanted to teach me about consequences, I was about to give them a masterclass. The document detailed everything: the arrest at the party, the police report with the Zhou family name, the potential drug charges that had been quietly swept away, and most importantly, the fact that Zhou Medical Consulting's principals had concealed material information about ongoing legal issues from their primary client. By the time I finished, it was nearly midnight. My roommate had returned and fallen asleep hours ago, but I'd been working with the focused intensity that had gotten me into Harvard Law. The difference was, this time I wasn't building my future, I was demolishing theirs. I saved the document and created an encrypted email account under a pseudonym. Tomorrow, I would send this information to 3 key people at Steinberg Industries: the Chief Compliance Officer, the Head of Vendor Relations, and most importantly, Sarah Steinberg herself, the CEO who had personally selected my parents' firm because of their impeccable reputation and ethical standards. But first, I had one more call to make. I dialed Harrison Mills' emergency line. It was past midnight, but lawyers in his position were used to crisis calls. "This is Mills." "Mr. Mills, it's Cameron Zhou. I need to ask you about attorney-client privilege." There was a pause. "Cameron? It's very late. Is everything all right? If I came to you as a client, not as my parents' daughter, but as someone hiring you independently, would our conversations be protected?" Another pause, longer this time. Harrison Mills hadn't become Chicago's most sought-after legal fixer by being slow on the uptake. "Yes, they would be." "Cameron, what's going on?" "I need to hire you. I need to know my rights regarding information I've gained through family business access. And I need to know them before 9 a.m. tomorrow." "This is about the credit cards, isn't it?" I smiled in the darkness of my dorm room. "Mr. Mills, this is about much more than credit cards. This is about consequences. And I think it's time my parents learned what real consequences look like." The next morning would bring phone calls, emergency meetings, and the kind of professional catastrophe that my parents had spent their entire careers avoiding. But tonight, for the first time in my life, I was the one holding all the cards, and unlike my parents, I wasn't about to cut anyone off without warning. Harrison Mills' office occupied the entire 42nd floor of the Willis Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows that made visitors feel like they were floating above Chicago. I'd been here dozens of times as my parents' tag-along daughter, but walking in at 8 a.m. as a paying client felt entirely different. "Cameron," Harrison stood from his massive mahogany desk, extending a hand. "I have to say, your call last night was unexpected." At 63, Harrison Mills looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for Chicago's most powerful attorney. Silver hair perfectly styled, suit that cost more than most people's cars, and eyes that missed nothing. He'd been handling my family's legal affairs since before I was born. "Thank you for seeing me so early," I said, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. "And for agreeing to represent me independently." "Before we begin," Harrison opened a legal pad, "I want to be crystal clear about what's happening here. As of this moment, you are my client. Your parents are also my clients, but in separate matters. If there's a conflict of interest, there will be," I interrupted. "By the end of today, there definitely will be." Harrison's pen stopped moving. In all the years I'd known him, I'd never seen him look genuinely surprised. Today was apparently a first. "Cameron, I think you need to tell me exactly what you're planning." I opened my laptop and turned it toward him. On the screen was the breach notification document I'd spent all night perfecting. Harrison's eyes widened as he read the first paragraph. "Jesus Christ, Cameron. Do you understand what this would do to your parents? Do you understand what they've done to me?" I shot back, then forced myself to breathe. Getting emotional wouldn't help. "Mr. Mills, I need you to review this document for legal accuracy. I need to know if anything I've written could be considered defamatory or legally actionable." Harrison was quiet for a long time, scrolling through the document. His expression grew more grave with each page. "The facts are accurate," he said finally. "I was there for most of this. The arrest, the cover-up, the Henderson situation, it's all documented. But Cameron, sending this to Steinberg Industries would be what? Honest? Transparent? The kind of ethical behavior they claim to value? Would be nuclear," Harrison finished. "This contract represents 70% of your parents' consulting income. If Steinberg terminates them, Zhou Medical Consulting is finished. Your parents would lose everything." I thought about my declined credit card, about eating ramen noodles for dinner because $7 was all I had. About the trust fund locked away for 3 more years while my parents taught me a lesson about consequences. "Good," I said simply. Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying me with new interest. "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious. They cut me off to protect their reputation. Now they get to find out what happens when that reputation is based on lies. What do you want from me?" I pulled out a check I'd written that morning, my last $500, the emergency money I'd kept hidden in my dorm room. "I want you to review this document, make sure it's legally bulletproof, and help me deliver it in a way that maximizes impact while minimizing my legal exposure." Harrison looked at the check, then back at me. Cameron, this is insane. These are your parents. They love you. This punishment isn't permanent. You're right, I stood up. This isn't permanent. It's going to get much worse. Something in my tone made Harrison's expression shift. The fatherly concern disappeared, replaced by the sharp calculation that had made him Chicago's most feared legal strategist. Show me what else you have, he said quietly. I opened another folder on my laptop. 3 years of Zhou Medical Consulting financial records. Client communications. Internal memos. Contract negotiations. Everything. How do you have access to? They trusted me. I was their research assistant, their consultant, their inside person on legal matters. They gave me administrative access to everything because I was family. I smiled grimly. Turns out family loyalty only flows one direction. Harrison spent the next hour reviewing my materials. I watched his expression change from concern to shock to something approaching professional admiration. This is incredibly thorough, he said finally. You've documented patterns of behavior that go far beyond the party incident. The inflated billing to Henderson Foundation, the undisclosed conflicts of interest with the medical device companies. The backdating of consultant agreements. 3 years of business school taught me to pay attention to details. Cameron, some of this borders on fraud. If the right prosecutor got hold of these files, then my parents better hope they can afford a really good lawyer, I said, meeting his eyes. Someone with experience in white-collar criminal defense. The implication hung in the air between us. Harrison Mills had built his reputation on keeping Chicago's elite out of prison. If my parents' business practices crossed into criminal territory, they'd need him more than ever, and he was now my lawyer first. What's your endgame here? Harrison asked. Destroying your parents won't get your credit cards back. This isn't about credit cards anymore. This is about power. They've spent my entire life making decisions for me, controlling my access to resources, managing my reputation. Now they get to experience what it feels like when someone else holds their future in their hands. I pulled out my phone and opened the email I drafted to Steinberg Industries. I'm sending this at noon today. Unless what? Unless they call me first. Unless they apologize. Unless they restore my financial access and treat me like the adult they claim they want me to be. Harrison checked his watch. It's 9:30 now. You're giving them 2.5 hours. I'm being generous. They gave me no warning at all. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Hope you slept well. Today would be a good day to look for a part-time job. Character building. Momi showed the text to Harrison. She's enjoying this. They both are. They think they're teaching me some valuable lesson about hard work and responsibility. And instead, you're about to teach them a lesson about mutually assured destruction. Exactly. Harrison was quiet for several minutes, staring out at the Chicago skyline. Finally, he turned back to me. I'll review your document and make the necessary legal adjustments. But Cameron, once you send this, there's no taking it back. Your relationship with your parents will never be the same. Mr. Mills, my relationship with my parents was never what I thought it was. They're willing to destroy my future to protect their business reputation. I'm just returning the favor. An hour later, Harrison handed me back my laptop with the revised document. He'd made it more formal, more legally precise, but the core message remained devastating. I've also prepared a cover letter, he said, explaining that this information comes from a concerned party with direct knowledge of Zhou Medical Consulting's operations. It requests an immediate investigation into potential contract violations. Thank you. Cameron, I have to ask one more time. Are you absolutely certain you want to do this? I thought about the conversation I'd overheard last week between my parents, when they thought I was studying upstairs. They'd been laughing about how I'd probably cry when my cards got declined, how I'd come crawling back within hours, ready to accept any conditions they set. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. At 11:45 a.m., I walked into the Starbucks across from Northwestern's law library and opened my laptop. The revised document was attached to an email addressed to 3 executives at Steinberg Industries. The subject line read, Urgent, Ethical Violations by Zhou Medical Consulting, Immediate Review Required. My finger hovered over the send button. Somewhere across the city, my parents were probably in surgery, saving children's lives, believing their punishment had taught me a valuable lesson about consequences. They had no idea their world was about to collapse. My phone rang. The caller ID showed my father's number. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. This time it was my mother, also voicemail, then a text from my father. Cam, can you call us? We want to talk. Too late, I thought. You had all night to call me. You had this morning to call me. Now you want to talk because it's convenient for you. I hit send. The email disappeared into cyberspace, carrying with it my parents' reputation, their business, and their financial future. Somewhere in the Steinberg Industries corporate offices, compliance officers were about to receive the most explosive whistleblower report of their careers. My phone immediately started ringing again. Both parents, calling simultaneously. I turned it off. At exactly noon, I walked into the law library and found an empty study carrel in the back corner. I had constitutional law at 2 p.m., civil procedure at 4 p.m., and a study group at 6 p.m. My life as a law student would continue exactly as before, except now I was the one holding all the power. I opened my laptop and began monitoring the situation. The email had been delivered and opened by all three recipients. Within minutes, I could see forwarding activity in my email tracking system. The document was being shared internally at Steinberg Industries. At 12:47 p.m. I received an automated response from Steinberg's compliance department acknowledging receipt of my report and confirming that an immediate investigation would be launched. At 1:15 p.m., my parents started calling me from the hospital. Emergency calls between surgeries, increasingly frantic voicemails. At 1:33 p.m., Harrison Mills texted me, "Your parents have been trying to reach me. I'm not taking their calls. You're my client now." At 1:45 p.m., I received an email from Sarah Steinberg herself, requesting additional information and expressing serious concern about the allegations against Zhou Medical Consulting. By 2 p.m., as I sat in constitutional law class pretending to pay attention to a lecture on due process, my parents' professional lives were imploding in real time. Steinberg's legal team was probably already drafting termination notices. Their other clients would hear about the investigation within hours. Chicago's medical community was smaller than people thought. The professor was discussing the importance of procedural fairness, the right to defend oneself before adverse action is taken. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had given me no due process, no opportunity to defend myself, no warning before they destroyed my financial stability. Now they were learning what that felt like. My phone, still turned off, was probably collecting a dozen voicemails, texts, and missed calls. Let them sweat. Let them panic. Let them experience the powerlessness they'd imposed on me. After class, I finally turned my phone back on. 18 missed calls, 37 text messages, and 12 voicemails. The most recent text was from my mother. "Cameron, please call us immediately. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. We need to fix this. A misunderstanding. That's what they were calling it now. I typed back, "No misunderstanding. You taught me about consequences. Consider this your education." Their response was immediate, "We're coming to campus. Don't do anything else until we get there." But it was too late for that. I'd already done everything I needed to do. At 4:30 p.m., as I walked out of civil procedure, I saw them. My parents stood next to their silver Mercedes in the visitor parking lot, both still wearing scrubs from the hospital. They looked older than I'd ever seen them, tired and desperate. I walked over slowly, enjoying the role reversal. For the first time in my life, they needed something from me more than I needed something from them. "Cameron," my mother started, "we need to talk." "About what?" "About how you cut off my credit cards without warning. About how you decided to teach me a lesson about responsibility. About how you assumed I'd come crawling back, begging for forgiveness." My father stepped forward. "Cameron, we know you sent something to Steinberg Industries. We got a call from their legal department. You need to contact them immediately and explain that it was a mistake." "A mistake?" I laughed. "The only mistake was trusting you with my future. You don't understand what you've done," my mother said, her voice cracking. "This could destroy everything we've built. The practice, the consulting business, our reputation." "Now you understand consequences," I interrupted. "Real consequences. Not the fake lesson you tried to teach me, but actual professional and financial ruin." They stared at me like they were seeing me for the first time. Their compliant, obedient daughter had been replaced by someone they didn't recognize. "What do you want?" my father asked quietly, finally. The right question. "I want my credit cards restored. I want my allowance reinstated. I want an apology for the way you've treated me. And I want a guarantee that you'll never use financial control to manipulate me again." "Done," my mother said immediately. "All of it. Just please, call Steinberg and no." The word hung in the air between us. "No," my father repeated. "You don't get to negotiate now. You had your chance to treat me with respect. You chose to humiliate me instead. So now you get to live with the consequences of that choice." "Cameron. Please," my mother was actually crying now. "We're your parents. We love you. This punishment wasn't about hurting you." "Yes, it was," I said simply. "It was exactly about hurting me. You wanted me to suffer so I'd learn a lesson. Well, congratulations. I learned something very important." "What?" "I learned that family loyalty is conditional. I learned that love comes with strings attached. And I learned that the people I trusted most in the world are willing to destroy my future to protect their own interests." I turned to walk away. "So that's it," my father called after me. "You're going to destroy us because we tried to teach you responsibility?" I stopped and looked back at them. Two brilliant surgeons, reduced to begging their daughter for mercy in a college parking lot. "I'm not destroying you," I said. "I'm just letting the truth about who you really are speak for itself. If that destroys you, maybe the problem isn't me." As I walked away, I could hear my mother's sobs echoing across the parking lot. It should have made me feel guilty. It should have made me want to fix this. Instead, it just reminded me that consequences, real consequences, hurt exactly as much as they were supposed to. The first domino fell at 6:17 a.m. the next morning. I was in the campus gym, running on a treadmill and watching the sunrise paint Chicago skyline in shades of amber and gold. My phone, tucked into the treadmill's cup holder, lit up with a news alert from the Chicago Business Journal. Steinberg Industries launches investigation into medical consulting partner. The article was brief but damning. Anonymous whistleblower allegations had prompted an immediate review of Zhou Medical Consulting's practices. Steinberg Industries had suspended all payments pending the investigation's outcome. The reporter had reached out to my parents for comment, but their response was a terse, no comment, through their attorney Harrison Mills. Even in crisis, they were still trying to control the narrative. I screenshot the article and sent it to Harrison with a simple message: "Looks like your other clients made the news." His response came back immediately: "We need to talk." My office. 1 hour. I finished my workout, showered, and made my way downtown. The Willis Tower felt different this morning, less like a monument to power and more like a fortress under siege. Harrison's secretary waved me through immediately, and I found him standing at his windows, staring down at the city below. "Cameron, we have a problem." "Define we," I said, settling into the familiar leather chair. "As far as I know, I don't have any problems. I sent accurate information to a company that deserved to know the truth about their business partner." Harrison turned from the window, and I was shocked by how tired he looked. The man who'd built his reputation on being unflappable appeared to have aged 5 years overnight. "Your parents called me at 11 last night, then again at 5 this morning. They're panicking. The Steinberg contract isn't just being suspended, it's being terminated immediately. Sarah Steinberg herself is personally overseeing the investigation." "Good. Maybe next time they'll think twice before lying to their clients." "Cameron, you don't understand. The contract termination triggers a cascade of consequences. Other clients are already asking questions. The Henderson Foundation is demanding a meeting. 3 potential new clients have canceled upcoming consultations." I felt a flutter of something that might have been satisfaction. Sounds like the market is working. Exactly as it should. Reputation matters, right? Isn't that what my parents were so worried about? Harrison sat down heavily. "There's more. The Illinois Medical Board received an anonymous complaint this morning about your parents' consulting practices. They're opening a formal investigation into potential conflicts of interest." That gave me pause. I hadn't contacted the medical board. I didn't, I know you didn't. But once these things get rolling, they take on a life of their own. Competitors smell blood in the water. Enemies come out of the woodwork. People who've been waiting for an opportunity to take your parents down are getting their chance. I thought about that for a moment. What enemies? Harrison pulled out a thick file. Did you know that 3 years ago, your parents were finalists for the Henderson Foundation contract along with 2 other consulting firms? Morrison and Associates and Chen Medical Strategy. I shook my head. Morrison and Associates filed a formal complaint claiming your parents had an unfair advantage due to personal relationships with the Henderson family. The complaint was dismissed, but Robert Morrison has been watching your parents ever since. He's the one who filed the medical board complaint. The satisfaction I'd been feeling began to curdle into something more complex. I'd wanted to hurt my parents, yes, but I hadn't intended to create an opportunity for their professional enemies. Chen Medical Strategy, Harrison continued, lost 2 major clients to Zhou Medical Consulting last year. Clients who cited ethical concerns about Chen's billing practices. Dr. Patricia Chen has been looking for a way to return the favor. So what are you saying? I'm saying you've done more than expose your parents' misconduct. You've started a feeding frenzy. Half of Chicago's medical consulting industry is now trying to profit from your parents' downfall. My phone buzzed with a text from my study group partner. Girl, are you okay? Saw the news about your parents' company. Call me. If you need anything, then another from my constitutional law professor. Cameron, please see me after class today. We should discuss how current events might affect your academic standing, and another from a classmate I barely knew. Holy shit, Cameron. Did you really bring down your own parents? That's savage. The story was spreading within the insular world of Northwestern law. Everyone would know by lunchtime that Cameron Zhou was the one who destroyed her family's business empire. Your parents want to meet, Harrison said, watching me scroll through the messages. All 3 of us. They're hoping I can negotiate some kind of resolution. What kind of resolution? They want you to send a retraction letter to Steinberg Industries. Claim you were emotionally distraught after a family disagreement and provided incomplete or misleading information. I looked up from my phone. Essentially, they want me to lie. They want you to help them salvage what's left of their business. No. Cameron, no. I stood up, pacing to the window where Harrison had been standing. Down below, Chicago hummed with the energy of millions of people going about their lives, unaware that 24 hours ago I'd been just another law student worried about bar exam fees. Let me ask you something, Mr. Mills. In all your years representing my parents, have you ever seen them admit they were wrong about anything? Harrison was quiet for a long time. Your parents are very confident people. They're arrogant. They believe their own press. They think they're untouchable. Because they save children's lives and sit on charity boards and write big donation checks. Medicine requires confidence. This isn't about medicine. This is about power. They cut me off because they could. Because they wanted to remind me who controlled my life. Because they enjoyed watching me scramble. I turned back to face him. Now they know what it feels like to have someone else control their fate. And I'm not done teaching them that lesson. Harrison's expression shifted. What do you mean, not done? I smiled. Did you think the Steinberg contract was the only ammunition I had? For the next hour, I walked Harrison through the rest of what I'd discovered during my years as my parents' unwitting accomplice. The ghost patients they'd created to inflate billing numbers. The speaking fees they'd received from pharmaceutical companies without disclosing them to clients. The tax-advantaged real estate investments they'd hidden behind Zhou Medical Consulting's corporate structure. Jesus, Cameron. Some of this could be criminal. All of this could be criminal. The question is whether anyone investigates deeply enough to find it. What are you going to do? Nothing. I'm going to sit back and watch the investigations unfold naturally. If the medical board wants to look into conflicts of interest, they'll find plenty to examine. If the IRS decides to audit Zhou Medical Consulting's tax returns, they'll discover some very creative interpretations of business expenses. Harrison stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You've changed, Cameron. Yesterday you were angry about credit cards. Today you're orchestrating the systematic destruction of your parents' entire professional lives. Yesterday, I thought my parents loved me unconditionally. Today I know better. My phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's number. Answer it, Harrison suggested. Let them know you're here. I declined the call and turned off my phone. The meeting offer stands, Harrison said. Your parents are willing to discuss restoring your financial support, giving you more independence, treating you as an adult, from a position of strength, I interrupted. When they thought they held all the cards, they wanted to teach me about consequences. Now that I'm the one with leverage, suddenly they want to negotiate. So what do you want? I want them to experience every consequence they've been avoiding for years. I want them to face the same scrutiny they've applied to everyone else. I want them to know what it feels like when their reputation is out of their control. And then? Then, maybe we can talk. I left Harrison's office and walked back toward campus, but instead of going to class, I found myself wandering through Millennium Park. The tourists were already out in force, taking selfies by the bean and eating overpriced hot dogs. Normal people living normal lives, untroubled by the kind of family warfare I'd unleashed. My phone, turned back on, showed 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most were from my parents, but several were from journalists who'd somehow gotten my number. The story was growing beyond the business pages into actual news. One message stood out from the rest. It was from Jennifer Martinez, a girl I'd known since high school whose mother had worked as an office manager for Zhou Medical Consulting 3 years ago. Cameron, I saw the news. I wanted you to know, my mom always said your parents were terrible bosses. She had to quit because they made her lie to clients about billing. She was afraid to speak up because they're so powerful. Maybe now she'll finally get justice. I stared at the message for a long time. This wasn't just about my parents and me anymore. Other people had been hurt by their arrogance, their willingness to bend rules, their abuse of power. I'd just given those people a voice. Another message, this one from a Northwestern alumna who worked at Chicago Children's Hospital. Hey Cameron, heard through the grapevine what happened. FYI, word around the hospital is that your parents have been burning bridges for years. A lot of nurses and residents are happy to see them taken down a peg. Stay strong. And another, from someone I didn't recognize, my dad is a medical device sales rep. He says your parents have been blacklisting competitors and taking kickbacks for years. Everyone knew but nobody could prove it. Thank you for having the courage to speak up. Each message revealed another layer of my parents' professional misconduct, another group of people they'd hurt or intimidated. I'd thought I was just exposing their hypocrisy about my arrest. Instead, I'd apparently opened the floodgates on years of accumulated grievances. By late afternoon, the story had evolved beyond a simple business dispute. The Chicago Tribune was running an investigative piece on ethics in medical consulting. 3 more former Zhou Medical Consulting employees had come forward with allegations of workplace harassment and fraudulent billing practices. A competing consulting firm had filed a formal complaint with the Illinois Attorney General's office, and through it all, my parents had maintained their silence, hiding behind Harrison Mills and no comment statements. My constitutional law professor, Dr. Sarah Kim, found me in the library around 5 p.m. Cameron, can we talk? She sat down across from me, her expression unreadable. I've been following the news about your family's business. I want you to know that whatever personal issues you're dealing with won't affect your academic standing here. Thank you, Professor. However, she continued, I also want to make sure you understand the implications of what's happening. The legal profession is small, especially in Chicago. Your parents have connections throughout the medical and legal communities. This situation could affect your career prospects. I'd been so focused on hurting my parents that I hadn't considered how it might hurt me. But even as the thought occurred to me, I realized I didn't care. Professor, can I ask you a hypothetical question? Of course. If a law student discovered that their family members were engaged in potentially criminal business practices, what would be their ethical obligation? Dr. Kim was quiet for a moment. Legally, there's no obligation to report family members unless you're serving as their attorney. Ethically, she paused. That's more complex. The legal profession requires integrity. We're officers of the court. We have a duty to uphold the law, even when it's personally costly. Even when it's family. Especially when it's family. If we make exceptions for people we love, we're not really committed to justice at all. That evening, as I sat in my dorm room reviewing evidence for tomorrow's civil procedure exam, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. For the first time in my life, I'd acted according to my own moral compass rather than my parents' expectations. I'd chosen justice over loyalty. Truth over convenience. My phone rang one more time. My father's number. This time, I answered. Cameron. His voice was barely a whisper. Please. We need to talk. We need to figure out how to fix this. There's nothing to fix, Dad. There's only the truth. And the truth is finally coming out. You're destroying us. No, I said quietly. I'm just refusing to help you hide who you really are anymore. The line went silent. Then, in a voice I'd never heard from my father before, broken, desperate, completely defeated, he said, "What have we done to you?" For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. You taught me about consequences, Dad. I'm just a very good student. 3 weeks later, I stood in the empty shell of what had once been Zhou Medical Consulting's prestigious downtown office. The furniture was gone, sold to pay creditors. The awards and diplomas that had adorned the walls were packed in boxes, waiting to be moved to my parents' significantly downsized home office. My mother sat behind a folding table, the only piece of furniture left in the room, signing the final dissolution papers. Her hands shook as she wrote her name, each signature another nail in the coffin of everything she and my father had built. There, she said quietly, setting down the pen. It's done. Harrison Mills gathered the papers efficiently, his expression professionally neutral. In the 3 weeks since I'd detonated their world, he'd transformed from family attorney to crisis manager to liquidation specialist. Today, he was here to witness the official end of Zhou Medical Consulting. My father stood at the window, looking out at the Chicago River. He'd aged dramatically, the confident surgeon replaced by a hollow-eyed man who jumped every time his phone rang, terrified of more bad news. The IRS settlement is final, Harrison reported, consulting his notes. The penalty for unreported pharmaceutical speaking fees was significant, but not criminal. The medical board censure will remain on your records for 5 years, but you can continue practicing medicine. The civil settlements with former employees have been paid. And the Henderson Foundation lawsuit, my mother asked. Withdrawn. Jonathan Henderson doesn't want the publicity of a prolonged legal battle. You'll return the consulting fees from the past year, but there won't be additional damages. I watched my parents absorb this information. They'd lost everything, the consulting business, most of their savings, their reputation, their position in Chicago's medical elite, but they weren't going to prison. They could still practice medicine, still save children's lives, still rebuild something from the wreckage. It was more mercy than they'd shown me when they cut off my credit cards without warning. Cameron, my father said without turning from the window, we need to talk. All of us. I'd been dreading this moment for 3 weeks. The formal confrontation, the attempt at reconciliation, the family meeting where we'd all pretend this could somehow be fixed with the right words and sufficient remorse. What's left to say? I asked. My mother looked up from the dissolution papers, her eyes red with exhaustion and grief. We need to understand why you did this. We need to understand what we did wrong. You really don't know? We know we hurt you, my father said, finally turning from the window. We know the credit card punishment was harsh. But Cameron, what you've done to us is so far beyond proportional response that we're struggling to understand your thinking. I sat down across from my mother, the folding table between us feeling like a vast chasm. You want to understand my thinking? Let me explain it to you. For the next hour, I laid out everything. Not just the credit cards, but years of conditional love, of achievements that were never quite enough, of subtle manipulation disguised as guidance. I told them about feeling like a performing seal, jumping through hoops for their approval while they moved the hoops higher and higher. I told them about the relief I'd felt when I realized I could hurt them the way they'd hurt me. About the satisfaction of watching them scramble and panic and beg. About the dark pleasure of seeing them experience powerlessness for the first time in their privileged lives. But most of all, I concluded, I told them about discovering that everything I'd admired about them, their success, their reputation, their moral authority, was built on lies and corruption and the exploitation of people who couldn't fight back. My parents listened in silence, their faces growing more stricken with each revelation. So when you ask me why I destroyed your business, I finished, the answer is simple. Because it deserved to be destroyed. Because you deserved to face consequences for your actions. And because I deserved to stop being your victim. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, my mother spoke. Cameron, we never meant for you to feel like our victim. We love you. Everything we did, every decision we made, was because we wanted the best for you. You wanted the best version of me. The version that reflected well on you. The version that followed your script and never questioned your authority. That's not, my father started, then stopped. Maybe that's exactly what we did. It was the first time either of them had acknowledged that their love might have been conditional. We were wrong, my mother said quietly. About the credit cards, about trying to control you, about thinking we knew what was best for your life. We were wrong about all of it. And the business practices? The billing fraud, the kickbacks, the employee harassment. My parents exchanged a look that spoke volumes. We told ourselves it was just business, my father said. Everyone was doing it. We weren't hurting anyone important. We were providing value to our clients, so a little creative accounting seemed justified. Who decides who's important enough to matter? I asked. No answer. The office manager who had to lie to clients, was she important? The nurses you blacklisted for questioning your billing, were they important? The competitors you destroyed with false allegations, were they important? Cameron, my mother's voice broke, we know we made mistakes. We know we hurt people. But did you have to destroy everything? Couldn't you have just talked to us? I thought about that question, the one I'd been asking myself for 3 weeks. Could I have handled this differently? Could I have confronted them directly, demanded change, threatened exposure if they didn't reform their behavior? No, I said finally. Because you would have found a way to make it my fault. You would have convinced yourselves that I was being dramatic, that I didn't understand the complexities of business, that I needed to grow up and accept how the world really works. You don't know that, Mom. 3 weeks ago you thought the appropriate response to my minor legal trouble was financial devastation. You thought humiliating me would teach me character. You enjoyed watching me struggle. She couldn't deny it. Because it was true. So what happens now? Harrison asked, breaking the family tension with practiced legal pragmatism. Cameron, your parents have lost their business, their savings, and their reputation. They've been censured by the medical board and audited by the IRS. The people they harmed have been compensated. Justice, by any reasonable measure, has been served. I looked at my parents, really looked at them, for the first time in weeks. They appeared smaller somehow, diminished not just by their losses but by the knowledge of what those losses had revealed about their character. What happens now, I said slowly, is that you learn to live with consequences. Real consequences. The kind that don't go away when you write a check or make a phone call or hire the right lawyer. And us? My mother asked. Our family? Our relationship? I stood up, gathering my purse and the law school backpack that had been my constant companion through this entire ordeal. I don't know. Maybe someday we can have a relationship based on honesty instead of control. Based on respect instead of manipulation. Based on who we actually are instead of who you want me to be. Cameron, please, I'm not disappearing. I said. I'm not cutting you out of my life forever. But I'm also not pretending this didn't happen. You showed me who you really are. I showed you who I really am. Now we all have to figure out what to do with that information. At the door, I paused. For what it's worth, I hope you become better people. I hope losing everything teaches you something about empathy. I hope you remember this feeling the next time you're tempted to abuse your power. Do you forgive us? My father asked. I considered the question. 3 weeks ago, I would have said forgiveness was impossible. 3 weeks ago, I was consumed with rage and hurt and the intoxicating power of revenge. Now, looking at these broken people who used to be my heroes, I felt something more complex. Not forgiveness, exactly, but not hatred either. Understanding. Maybe. Acceptance of who they were and who I'd become in response. I don't forgive you, I said finally. But I don't hate you anymore either. I just see you clearly. For the first time in my life. I walked out of the empty office and into the Chicago afternoon. The city hummed around me, millions of people pursuing their own dreams, fighting their own battles, making their own choices about power and justice and love. My phone buzzed with a text from Harvard Law School, confirming my enrollment for the fall semester. I'd be starting fresh in Cambridge, 3,000 miles from the wreckage of my family's empire. No credit cards backed by my parents' accounts, no trust fund safety net, no family connections to smooth my path, just my own intelligence, my own determination, and the hard-earned knowledge that sometimes the people who love you are the ones you need to fight the hardest. I thought about the girl I'd been 4 weeks ago, naive, dependent, desperate for her parents' approval. That girl was gone, destroyed as thoroughly as Zhou Medical Consulting. In her place was someone harder, more self-reliant, less trusting. But more honest, someone who understood that real power wasn't inherited or given, it was taken, someone who knew that justice and revenge weren't opposites, but different faces of the same fundamental truth. Actions have consequences, and consequences don't care about your intentions or your love or your desire to be seen as a good person. As I walked toward the L station that would take me back to Northwestern for my final exams, I allowed myself one last look at the Willis Tower. Somewhere up there, Harrison Mills was probably helping my parents figure out their next steps, how to rebuild their lives, how to salvage their careers, how to live with the knowledge of what they'd lost and why they'd lost it. I hoped they'd learn something from this experience. I hoped they'd become the people I'd once believed them to be, but I wasn't waiting around to find out. After all, I had my own life to build now. And this time, I was the only one holding the blueprints. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.